Hello there, kia ora. Did you know that humans are the only animals that we know of that can create meaning from context clues? Well, I mean, dolphins might be able to, but they're dicks, so nobody listens to them. Technically, we call it the relationship between signifier and syntagm, but basically it means that we can put two things together and get a meaning. And if one of those things change, then the meaning changes. And these days, we actually communicate using this method all the time, and most people don't realize it. And there are media organizations out there who know this and manipulate this. Like this story that we saw in the Herald from this weekend, which I'll get into shortly. Firstly, though, a signifier is any tool that we use to communicate. Me, talking to you right now, each word is a signifier. And the tone that I use, well, that's also a signifier. The facial expressions I use while talking, also a signifier. Any subtitles that you're reading on this video, well, that's a signifier. Any meme I stick up right now, you better believe that's a signifier. Any reaction emoji that you use, that's a signifier. Go on, give it a go, hit that thumbs up button and make this an interactive lesson. And because we have contextual knowledge, like being able to understand English or read the language or know where a meme comes from or an emoji comes from, that syntagm then creates context that we understand. It's one of the reasons why all traffic lights everywhere use the same color codes, and we can recognize the meaning behind this sign or this one. And signifiers can change meaning depending on context. So these slightly blurry emoji, for the sake of not getting this video taken down, mean very different things on a socializing app than they do on a cooking blog. And we create the context based on how they're put together, and we can use those context clues to understand other people's views and help show other people our views in a really succinct way. But there are examples of signifiers that only some people get. It creates context only for those that know how it's meant to be interpreted. I mean, I can do this and say, live long and prosper, and if you've never seen or heard of Star Trek, it means nothing. But if you've studied the Jewish alphabet, that hand signal means something very different to the people who have studied early American literature where that phrase was first used. And this way of creating meaning specific for certain groups is where we get dog whistles from. It's a use of language and signifiers that to many don't create a specific context, but to some, it creates a very specific context. Phrases like the one used by my local National Party MP Dan Bidwar during the election, like, I believe in one person, one vote, when asked about Māori electorates and Māori wards. They get the same voting rights as people on the general roll, but that's a dog whistle catch cry to people to say, well, do they though? To raise questions. In fact, the only people who get those extra votes are people who own property in local body elections in a region that they're not currently living in. But they're not going to say anything about that in government, and that's certainly not who they're hinting to. But Dan and any number of other candidates and Facebook idiots, when they say things like that, are clearly people who understand that contextual meaning to be a racist dog whistle. So, how does this tie back into that Herald page that I showed you before? Well, when it comes to print media, there's a few things that happen all at once to build context. The language used and layout used create an association. Here is a booming headline about an illicit substance that creates a sense of moral judgment, and under it, a giant picture of former MP Kitty Allen. Now, the way humans create context of image and text creates a sense that this article is about her, and the layout of the images imply that other people on the page are involved as well. The headline has nothing to do with any one of those people pictured, but the first impression created by the layout doesn't stop you making that assumption. Secondly, in play, we have something called the science post effect. It's a phenomenon of where people read maybe the headlines in the first paragraph before they move on and form opinions based simply on those two signifiers. It happens 95% of the time anyone interacts with any form of media, be that traditional, broadcast, or social. And here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, researchers show in this way to create context creates an imbalance in perceptions towards Māori, particularly Wahine Māori, and is seen as a major contributor as to why many feel our mainstream media creates a bias against them. Now, ironically, the piece from the Herald, several paragraphs in, is about the writer's opinion on why the RNZ podcast featuring Kitty Allen was recently pulled from their schedule. And a follow-up story in the Herald shows that the podcast, released under an OIA, covers the topic of how wahine Māori in positions of authority are treated. So remember, all media has a bias. It might be visible in the language they use, the voices they platform, the stance they take on issues, the way that they frame news. But it also includes unnoticed elements, like the way a news piece is laid out in front of you. It's using those different signifiers that create context that some people interpret in ways that will ring out to them, like a dog whistle does to dogs. Here. The links to other things that come at the end of YouTube videos. Those ones there, here.